Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the patch 9.11 notes rundown. This one's a bit of an interesting one because I haven't had too much of a chance to play recently. What with exams, but having just finished my final exam of this year just a few moments ago, very excited to get into this one. A lot of the things that I thought were a problem were actually resolved in the last patch, 9.10, things like Vayne, things like Winsu's. Vladimir's still standing though, so I am interested to see what happens to this one because I'm not too sure what the big problems are. And I do think that the game's actually in a pretty good state right now. I hear maybe Elise is a little bit strong, obviously after all the changes with the level 3 system, but yeah, I've tried her, it didn't feel that oppressive, and yeah, I haven't seen too much of her either, so I think she's probably okay. Outside of that, yeah, just sort of keep nerfing Vlad. And quickly, I have changed the levels on my microphone. Hopefully it's still visible. Well, it's not visible, it's the wrong sense. Audible in this video. So let's dive in what we got. Probably read this bit first. A good week. Good, yes, I am having a good week. In this patch, outside some smaller balance work and assortment of champions, we have bigger updates for down. Okay, the Zach revert went through. I hate everything. Alright. Alright, yes. Oh, they put the challenger recall in. Demon Trist. That was the wrong choice of Trist skin. Alright, let's go in here. Akali, less damage, less energy. I don't know how the energy refund works because I'm pretty sure she fills most of her energy bar anyway when she throws down her shroud, but in any case in lane this is the same, so it's probably fine. Just gonna lower her DPS later on if she starts to rely on multiple abilities, which I don't think she really does. She does fine with just the one rotation, so I think she'll be okay. And then what we're seeing here, the damage is also going down on the passive there, losing a lot of the a lot of both scalings. That's pretty crazy because you're building the Gunblade already, so you're getting a lot of your damage. It's coming through both of these scalings. It's not like you're just building for one or the other. You're actually getting both with the Gunblade, so to lose out on both is pretty huge. That's pretty offensive. Akali mains are going to be sad. She's a little bit strong, but that seems quite steep in my opinion. We have Amumu is apparently getting nerfed. So it's a bit of an interesting one because I don't think Amumu's that broken. I know he has a pretty decent win rate right now. I think a lot of the tanks do. But it seems quite interesting that like Amumu was just buffed. It says he had 9.8. He's just had this done. And now they're reverting it. Now they're nerfing him. And I don't know, that just seems very strange to me that they've given it such little time, and just the second he comes back into viability, he gets nerfed. On top of that, he does true damage. Like Amumu still has the same problems that he's always had. He has a pretty slow clear, very terrible 1v1. And if you get on him, he's kind of doomed, especially low. Magpie just landed right outside my window. Very pretty bird. Amumu still has the same problems, right? That's a bit of a tangent, but he has terrible single target clears and gets very low whilst doing those, especially you think about things like red buff. So just buffing his clear speed and a little bit of his damage in 1v1, I think is fine. Does that make him oppressive? No, he's not running around tearing up everyone who goes for a scuttle crab. He's not, level 2 invading you or something like that. So I don't really know why this needed to happen, because every time I've seen Amumu, I've done pretty well. He seems to be pretty fair and very abusable. Alright, cool. Yeah, quality of life on Echo. There's a lot of abilities that work like this where there's like a little bit of a delay after an ability or something, so to have that stripped away is very nice. Right, Galio. W base damage decreased. Honestly, didn't know it did damage. No, like really did not know that ability did damage. It does damage? Like when? It's not, so what, they put a much higher ratio on it? But like honestly, which part of that ability does damage? Actually just gonna look it up. Okay, so it turns out that Galio has an AP scaling on his W, and his W actually does damage. This is something I had absolutely no idea about. I've honestly never seen it do any damage. I mean, maybe Procaludens when he was an AP build for sure, but since then. I've absolutely never seen it. So that's an interesting one. I mean, he's traded 30 damage for 0.6 AP ratio. That's pretty huge. But at the same time, it's very interesting because they're now trying to put him back towards building AP, but they also gutted all of his AP building potential. And they also gutted his tankiness. I mean, he's only really playable support. And I think that's intrinsic of the fact that abilities like Shield of Durand and Warwick's Howl, these abilities just give you damage reduction. Also, Defiant Dance being another one that had to be changed. I think that having these abilities is really stupid because it gives a huge amount of stats for absolutely no cost, other than obviously, mana and the cooldown. And if you want to balance Galio around that, if you want to make him an AP champion, then, he has a lot of abilities that work very, very well together, and put him, he needs to be a melee range, to use things like the Colossal Smash and the Justice Punch. And if he's building full AP, he's going to evaporate if he doesn't have this Shield of Durand. But when he does have Shield of Durand, suddenly it's things like, you can play him support. You don't need any gold because you just have this button. You can, if you play him tanky, he's entirely unkillable. If you're playing him mid, even if you're playing him full AP, he's still insanely tanky without building any stats for it. And so I think having that damage reduction is actually not too healthy for the game. But this is a really interesting one because I don't think people want to build AP on Galio. So this is frankly just like a kind of a nerf out of nowhere that I think as a support, he's not that OP. I think he's pretty strong. He's pretty interesting and has some really, interesting lanes. Things like the Callista Galio lane is very strong, but he only works in certain lanes and certain matchups, certain situations. I think that's fine. I think that's healthy. So I don't really see why he needed a nerf. And as well, he's losing damage off of his E. It just seems strange to me. On Gragas, we're getting a pretty hefty health buff, actually. He's losing some attack damage. Oh, no, gaining attack damage. My mistake. This is crazy. I think Gragas is fine. This is actually a really large amount of extra tankiness, which is really nice because on a lot of Gragas builds, you want to go for example, the Runic Echoes and the Magpie's back. You want to go for Runic Echoes and then maybe an Iceborne or something like that. But you do often skip over the Cinderhulk. You often get a little bit of AP before you start to build into tanky. And that is even if you want to go any sort of tank stats at all. It's totally viable to go for, Runic Echoes into like a Zonya's because you have, like I mentioned, for damage reduction. Same as Galio, you have it on Gragas' W as well, the Drunken Rage. So he's already quite tanky, and now they're just giving him a little bit extra to get him through the early game. And he does have some pretty rough matchups. He has some decent ones as well, though. So if you're a Gragas player, you are very happy with this, and I think I'll probably be trying out Gragas a little bit on this patch because of this. This is really nice. Alright, what have we got next? We have Janna. Her W cooldown now scales. Okay, so it goes down as you put points in it. Fine. And the base damage is decreased. Like, that's really good because Janna W actually just does too much damage. Like, it's kind of crazy. It sure has a heavy mana cost, high cooldown, and there's the downsides to her casting it, but it feels like the downsides of her losing the movement speed don't, outweigh the fact that a Janna is sort of like chunking you for, maybe a quarter of your health or something. Late game, it's a Janna. Obviously, she has to walk up and do it, but it just feels wrong that her W does so much damage, both in the early game in lane and also later on when she's got a couple of items. So I'm very happy that's going down. What we got else? E cooldown decreases when Janna CCs enemies. That's a very interesting one. Okay, so that's a really cool way to add interaction into Janna's kit. So the shield itself is being buffed. Fine, I guess she's kind of weak right now. But yeah, they lower the cooldown early, and also it's lowering whenever you're hitting your... Oh, even it slows as well, so landing your W is going to reduce the cooldown as well. So that's really interesting, because obviously it's each ability, so it's not things like, Twin Shadows is going to affect this, it's just abilities. So that's going to be your Zephyr, your Tempest, and of course, Monsoon. All of your abilities are going to proc this, so it says each ability that slows or knockbacks an enemy champion reduces the cooldown. So I'm going to interpret that as even if you hit a multi-man Tornado, a multi-man Monsoon, you're only going to be getting that proc once. And I think that was definitely reasonable. You don't want instant Janna shield cooldowns because it's pretty hefty. That's really interesting. It's really cool. It gives counterplay to Janna, which is something that she's been very famous for not really having, as well as interaction for the Janna player. Again, something she's well known for not really having. She's just kind of AFK point and click. So really like that. All right, we have Jace. Base damage decreased late. It's a shock blast Q. and the ratio decreased. Yeah, so they're nerfing his late game damage. So that, yeah, he's a lane bully and he's a little bit too strong late, at least in pro play. That's very understandable. I did see something a while ago. Someone put up on Reddit or something. Obviously, it's Reddit analysts. So, but it did make an interesting point, which was on the topic of Jace getting damage nerfs, because I think this one went through on PPE a while ago. That it seemed strange that Riot would make this champion that's meant to be this sort of hybrid, sometimes a bruiser, sometimes a range carry, and then all they ever seem to do is nerf him as the ranged champion, and they never really make meaningful changes and then buff also his melee form. Every time you see Jace come up in the patch notes, it's something about his range form, it's something about the Mercury Cannon. You never see something like, oh, we've actually increased Jax's To The Skies damage, or something like, oh, he's actually a little bit tankier, he gets armor now, when I think he already does get a little bit of armor magic assist, but you know what I mean. They never, there are no buffs that make it more rewarding to play as melee. It's always just things like, we're increasing the cooldown on acceleration gate so that you can't fire too many Qs through it, or we're lowering the damage on Shock Blast here. So I think that's an interesting thought posed by that guy. I mean, do I think this is an understandable nerf? Yeah, sure, but I would like to see more elements in Jace's kit that make him stronger in melee form and reward more for switching between them, because right now it's post 15 minutes, obviously melee form is very strong, level 1, because you have 2 abilities, and in the early stages of the game, level 2 you're getting 3, so you're getting 4 abilities, level 3 you're getting 6 abilities, so this is why he's so strong in lane. But then the second you get out of lane, once you hit 15 to 20 minutes, Jaces almost never go into melee form except to rapidly clear a wave and maybe get some mana back, and that doesn't seem how the champion is designed to be. Alright, Karthus ult nerfs, understandable, no one needs to tell you anything about those. Alright, Musty, it's literally just damage, just lower the base, lower the ratio, understandable. Karthus is not the most interactive of abilities. Musty, what have we got? Bonus attack speed at level 1 removed, and the isolated damage decreased. Yeah, I think the Musty is actually really strong right now, because a lot of people think that he's quite weak in high elo, but people are still building the old attack speed build, and I think that with the changes to his Q, and obviously the nerfs to Guinsoo's, you actually have a really good time if you just go full AD. So what I do is, I still go Devourer, not Devourer, whatever it's called now, Blood Razor, but then into Spear of Shojin and Essence Reaver, and you'll find a couple of Musty one tricks doing that as well. Infinity Edge after that, maybe a Bloodthirster or something similar, final item, and your Q has almost no cooldown because of the Spear of Shojin and Essence Reaver combo, and it's doing an insane amount of damage because it's hitting him multiple times, So what we're doing here is he's losing some attack speed level 1, which a lot of junglers got that as a buff. I think Yi's clear is actually kind of rough. So very interesting that they kind of nerf that. They're really nerfing his clear here. Obviously losing this attack speed, and his Q is doing less damage on single target camps. When it comes to chickens and crocs, he's still fine, but the buffs, he's clearing them a lot slower. And again, I can't stress, he loses a fair amount of health, unless you want to take a lot of time to heal up with the meditate. His clear speed isn't that fast, so this could be pretty hefty to Musty if people do start to punish it a little bit more. Of course, you can't have Musty without Rammus. I actually think that that's a symbol of how OP he is at times, is that sometimes, even when versus Rammus, you look when he was building Conqueror Conqueror Guinsoo's, he could go Wits End as well, and he would just melt straight through a Rammus. I actually think that the full AD build I just mentioned actually doesn't struggle too much with a Rammus, obviously because there's still a lot of true damage in there, and the Q multiple hits are going to buy you time during his armored up section, and they're not going to be applying that damage back to you. So I think he's okay. But Rammus is apparently too strong. I see that he is topping out the win rate in solo queue right now, but again, I don't see him too much, and when I do see him, I seem to do pretty well. I just think he has a lot of favorable matchups right now. So it's really strange to me that he's, again, getting nerfed. I mean, you think about a lot of meta junglers, Rammus has a pretty decent time into. Things like Elise, he's very good into. He's not great into things like Kindred, which is fine. Kindred's designed to beat tanks, but, when you look at Kindred, Rammus still has a pretty good time versus that champion, even though she's meant to counter his archetype. Rammus obviously, I'm pretty sure he has a very decent time versus Red Kane as well. So when he's doing well versus the champions that are meant to counter him, you could make that an argument that he's a little bit too strong. But at the same time, I think it's just because of the overall changes to the jungle that have been made that Rammus gets stronger. I don't think it's actually a problem with Rammus himself. So what have we got? Apparently his damage is too high in team fights. I don't know about that one, but sure. But so what they're doing there, actually losing a lot of damage later on off of the spike shell. Because remember, this is proccing. It's getting doubled, I believe. It's either doubled or it goes to 150%, but it's definitely getting increased when you're in your turtle stance. Oh, that's Udia. Whatever. Powerball's the Q. Defensive curl. Whenever you're in defensive curl for Rammus W, the armor up, you're going to be sort of really heavily increasing this amount, so it is quite a sizable nerf. It's also hurting his clear speed because he does this he does this spike shell damage on hit, which is something that some people might not know. So to lose that, or to lose that much later on, it's kind of rough, but it's not terrible for his early game, right? And then losing damage per second off of Tremors. That's fine because Tremors isn't really a damage ability, but this does add up. I kind of wish they said how much total damage you're losing here, because I believe it goes for about 7 seconds or so, and that's going to add up to a pretty hefty amount of damage. It's 70 damage level 1, and then you look up 210 damage to make 5 people. If I'm right about the 7 seconds thing, 210 damage, that's actually like an insane amount, especially when it's going across 5. But that's a potential 1k damage you're missing out on in a team fight, so that's huge. At the same time, Rammus is not designed for a damage champion, so that's understandable. What are we doing? Warwick is getting a buff. Okay. I think Warwick is in a little bit of a weak spot right now, but again, as tanks come back into the meta, I think Warwick gets stronger and stronger. But if I want to just give him a little bit of a tap, little bit of a tap to get him back into the a healthy state, I'm okay if that's what we're doing. Wow, you're getting a lot more healing when you buff out when you max out the Q here. So it's a 20% increase from 70 to 90. On top of that, lots of Warwicks wouldn't actually max the Q. I believe the optimal thing was decided to be 3 points into Q and then max your W, but now we're saying you're actually getting 40% extra healing, basically. You're almost doubling the amount of healing you'd be getting now if you went from the old max 3 to the new max 5. So, very strong. I might try out Warwick. I think this is really useful for his clears. Like I said, look, whilst Bloodhunt is still the best first max, if you want to risk it with the Q, you're going to be rewarded a lot more, and that's cool. I think with Warwick, really, you can max anything on Warwick, and a little bit of action onto his Q, still very nice. So, yeah, definitely like this buff a lot. Might play some Warwick. We got on Yuumi, Q range indicator, brightness adjusted. I think that it would be really nice if there was some sort of indicator of the max range for people playing against Yuumi, because I haven't played a lot with Yuumi. The more I play with her, the more I get used to it. But a lot of times I was playing versus Yuumi, and because I'd never played with her, I'd never seen the circle, I didn't have that range in my head, and it got really confusing as to when the ability would actually end. I didn't know, does it time out? Is it a fixed distance from where it's cast, from where Yuumi is at the time? How does this interact? I wasn't too sure. And so I think that that's a level of clarity that I'd like to see added into the ability. We're also getting, so she gets assists when she attaches to someone. I assumed she already did, but if she didn't, she probably should. Although she isn't necessarily always bringing that much to a table. If the situations where she wouldn't have gotten an assist before and is now getting an assist, it's going to be, times that she's just, all she's really doing is giving that little bit of extra AD and AP, which may or may not have made the difference. Also, something sort of tweaked with her. I'm not really sure how this move speed worked before, so I don't really know how it works now. Or I don't know what the changes or how it impacts her with how it works now. But make it relative to AP, sure. Yep, this one was terrible. It would show you Yumi's icon, not who she was attached to. That felt awful because you were like, okay, cool, this is not useful information. You know that Yumi's somewhere, well, great, she's always attached to someone. It's much more important to know who she's attached to. Also kind of don't like the icon that shows like a little border around people. I don't know, I think it just looks a bit weird, but you need to have something there, right? So and then just more more bug fixes. All right, Zac. This one causes me great pain. I used to love old Zac. I played him an awful lot. And what they're doing on this patch is reverting Zac a little bit. They're not reverting his Q, they're keeping the new interactive Q. And they are changing something to do with his W, giving it a new ratio. I think it doesn't have that ratio right now. I'm assuming they're not touching the base, right? But I think they're just adding this in right here. The Q, definitely keeping that part because it's just a straight upgrade over his old one in terms of flavor and how it feels to use, and also just like how it's useful. So what they're doing is now changing his ult back to how it used to be. Step 1, I think Zac's reworked ult, the one that you would see on 9.10 for the last 2 years or whatever it's been. About 2 years. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was really interesting. I think it's something that was not seen in any other part of the game, and I really wish that Riot had tried a little bit, increase the air or something, make it easier to hit instead of just removing it, because I really liked it. Just as a concept, it was really cool. It was really flavorful. But he's this big, he's basically the dirty bubble from SpongeBob. He can jump in and he's going to grab people and move them with him. He's going to absorb them up. I think it's really cool, and I really hope it comes back in another champion, maybe with a different kit. However, I do have very fond memories of the original Let's Bounce. But I think that this is a really big problem, because a lot of the reason they're doing this is giving him more damage, because as I say, he is supposed to dive in. Step 1, I don't agree with that. I think when you have the old ult, for him to dive in, disrupt people, but just ultimately be a tank, is fine. I think that's totally reasonable. He doesn't have to have damage. But apparently players felt like they really wanted him to do a bit more damage, and it's how tanky he was. You think about something like like a Maokai is diving less deep but does less damage. So for someone who's going to go that much deeper, who's basically consistently going to be hitting the backline, they want him to be a threat, right? The issue I really have with this is that the game is different now to how it was when Zac initially, had this ultimate. Because I have really fond memories of playing Zac, and you go Cinderhulk, or it was something different at the time. I think it was called Cinderhulk, but maybe it was. You go for the the health jungle item at least. CDR boots, Spirit Visage, and I'd get Guardian Angel. And this is when Guardian Angel basically built out of the components of Gargoyle Stoneplate. Before it was an AD item, and it would scale off of giving you % max health instead of just a flat amount. And with this build, you're basically unstoppable once you hit those sort of 3 items. You'd also take a lot of CDR runes as well to sort of make sure you ease up as often as possible. Things like your Q as well. A lot of CDR was very valuable on Zac, but the reason this worked, and you'd be able to one hit the backline, not one hit, but kill them in one rotation pretty effectively, even without Sork Shoes. I'd only get Sork Shoes in the rarest of situations. I would never build any more AP. Maybe an Abyssal Mask / Scepter, whichever happened to be in favor at the time. Maybe a Leandris, but very, very, very situational, that you'd ever need more damage than that. And the reason because that is because Magic Pen runes existed. You had enough just with those, because that's how you play Zac. You'd go CDR runes and Magic Pen runes. Magic Pen runes don't exist anymore, and so Zac's percentage max health damage like he's getting on his W and high base values aren't as valuable anymore. And because of that, I really feel like his damage is it's not going to be the same as the old Zac was. The other reason I really liked old Zac was Courage of the Colossus, which I just straight up prefer to Aftershock conceptually as a rune. Again, I'm saying fond memories a lot, but I had some really good times playing Zac. You go in, you engage, you get the 1v5, you get the into the 1v5, big shield, huge team fight breaks out. It ends up being very close. It's just you and one other person left, and then just as Courage comes back up, you manage to land an E, and you're timing off the Courage, so it feels very rewarding that you then land it, you get the shield, you win the fight. That's not happening again anymore. It's just Aftershock, really boring. So that was a big part of what made playing tanks like Zac fun for me. But yeah, just the fact that it just like Magic Pen runes don't exist anymore. The Guardian Angel part, not so much, but that was just a really fun part of the build for me. But the Magic Pen runes don't exist anymore. I think is personally a really big issue when it comes to playing this Zac. And it's also, I think his ult is a lot more boring and less interactive. It's kind of just like Wukong. I don't see too much difference between Wukong ult and Let's Bounce. So, not very happy with this one, but, we'll see how it goes. And then finally, we just got some irrelevant things. Challenger Recall, obviously very integral to my experiences as, the rank 1 player in every single server. But it's cool that they finally brought this in. It's been like 5 years since, Meteors came up with the idea, or whoever it was. And then they're keeping the Pride Rainbow in. Cool. I like that thing. Just real quick on the bug fixes. I'm getting... this one was a bit of an interesting one. Death Stance and area interaction would just kill you because you just constantly be hit by Death Stance. So get rid of that one. I'm surprised that this one stayed in because they fixed it with Kayn last week. Shadow Assassin Kayn's W could steal Herald Eye. You'd think they would have gone over everything to stop this from happening, but apparently not. So yeah, didn't know that existed. Probably should have been fixed earlier, but cool, it's out of the game now. And looks like that is about it. Ventress out of there. So that is my rundown for the patch. Turns out Galio W did damage. Who knew? Vladimir still untouched. Some interesting changes. Really, really not happy about the Zac, but going to be interested to see things like the Gragas, the Janna, who's the other one, Warwick as well. Should be very interesting to see how those ones turns out and how this patch shapes the game. So thank you all very much for watching. Again, feedback greatly appreciated in the form of comments and DMs and whatnot. As always, have a nice day.